400 men watched as a drunk outsider put his hands on Bumpy Johnson's throat. The room froze. No shouting, no ruse, just the quiet certainty that someone misread the rules. The room smelled of whiskey and smoke, thick enough to taste. 400 men filled the hall, packed shoulder to shoulder, their eyes glinting with curiosity and caution. A lone outsider pushed through the crowd, uninvited, unafraid, or maybe just ignorant. He grinned, too wide, too loud, as if he owned a piece of Harlem that wasn't his. And then he did it, hands rising, fingers brushing the jaw of Bumpy Johnson. Not a tap, not a warning, full-on intrusion. Bumpy didn't flinch. His eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in calculation. The room held its breath. Even the drunks stopped laughing mid-cough. Every man in that hall knew Bumpy's name, his reputation woven into the city like the subway lines themselves. To touch him publicly was a mistake bigger than the man in front of them realized. The outsider leaned closer, smiling, speaking in that kind of careless tone that only someone about to learn a lesson uses. "Relax, old man," he said, thinking this was bravado. But his voice cracked under the weight of the room's silent judgment. Bumpy's hand didn't move. His jaw didn't tighten. He just looked, calm as the eye of a storm. And in that stillness, the message was clear. He controlled the moment. He had always controlled the moment. A bead of sweat ran down the outsider's temple. The men around them shifted, some forward, some back, but no one intervened. They didn't need to. The room itself seemed to lean toward Bumpy, drawn to the authority that radiated from him. This wasn't a fight yet. This was a warning. And warnings in Harlem weren't whispered. They were felt. Bumpy didn't move, but the room moved around him. Every chair, every shoulder, every eye seemed to bend toward his presence. Harlem wasn't just a place. It was a hierarchy, a living organism, and Bumpy Johnson was its quiet pulse. The outsider laughed again, nervously this time, thinking numbers would protect him. 400 men, all witnesses, yet none of them dared touch him. Not because they feared the law, but because they feared what Bumpy represented. Restraint, precision, power that didn't need a shout. The whispers began, soft at first, like wind through cracked windows. "That's Bumpy Johnson. The man doesn't even have to move." Each word reinforced the unspoken code. Respect isn't given, it's measured. And here, in this room, Bumpy was the standard. He stepped slightly forward, not aggressive, just deliberate. The outsider recoiled, a twitch in his jaw. He hadn't expected the calm, not the quiet authority. He thought strength was loud. He thought dominance was chaos. He didn't understand the real force. Around them, the crowd watched with a mix of awe and fear. Older men, who'd survived more than their share of violence, nodded subtly. Younger men, ambitious and restless, clenched their fists but kept them at their sides. Everyone knew the invisible weight pressing down. It wasn't just Bumpy, it was Harlem itself standing behind him. And in that weight, there was morality. A reminder that power isn't measured by the speed of your fists, but by the control of your decisions. One wrong move, one moment of impatience, and a legacy could be forged or destroyed in seconds. The outsider's grin faltered. He didn't realize it yet, but the rules of this city weren't written for him. They were enforced silently, collectively, and inevitably. And tonight, he had just stepped across a line that most men never dared approach. Bumpy tilted his head, slow, measured, like a chess master contemplating the board. Every man in that room felt it. The storm had not yet struck, but it was coming. And it would be precise. It would be final. The outsider laughed again, louder this time. Nervous, defiant, foolish. He thought the crowd's silence was weakness. He thought numbers mattered more than presence, more than respect. 400 men, and still, he felt untouchable. But Bumpy Johnson didn't measure threats by size. He measured them by intent, and this man's intent was clear. Disrespect, challenge, a direct violation of every unspoken law in Harlem. The room shifted imperceptibly at first. Chairs scraped the floor. Cigarette smoke curled upward. Eyes tracked every twitch, every breath. No one spoke, Yet every body spoke in unison. "You do not cross Bumpy Johnson." The outsider leaned closer, smirking. "Come on, old man," he sneered. "You afraid of a little fight?" Bumpy's lips didn't move. His gaze didn't waver. But the silence around him thickened, pressing against the outsider like water against glass. Every man in that room knew. The first move wasn't about violence. It was about judgment. And judgment had already been passed. Then the mistake became visible. The outsider, emboldened by ignorance, misread the calm. He laughed again, this time brushing his hand across Bumpy's chest. A careless touch that shattered the fragile restraint. The room tensed. Some men leaned forward. Others sank back. But nobody interfered. Nobody had to. Power was already being demonstrated. The outsider had triggered a force far greater than brute strength. In that space between calm and chaos, Bumpy Johnson decided. Not impulsively, not out of anger, but decisively. The measure of a man isn't in the threats he endures. It's in how he responds. 3 seconds. That's all it would take. 3 seconds to correct a mistake so large that the city would remember it, whispered in every corner of Harlem. The outsider didn't know it yet, but he had already lost. Bumpy didn't rush. He didn't shout. He didn't even move at first. He just breathed, slow and steady, letting the weight of the room settle around him. The outsider waited, a twitching smirk still on his face, unaware that the real force wasn't in fists or fear. It was in control. The men around them felt it. Every subtle shift in Bumpy's posture spoke louder than words. The drunk outsider thought he could provoke chaos, but calm had a gravity all its own. It pulled the room inward, centering all attention on the quiet, unyielding figure that was Bumpy Johnson. Eyes darted, shifting allegiance in the silence. Young men learned to watch and listen. Older men nodded imperceptibly. The room itself seemed to exhale, bracing for what was inevitable, but still waiting for restraint to snap into action. And Bumpy's restraint held. He leaned slightly forward, not to strike, but to measure. The outsider laughed nervously. "You just gonna stand there?" he sneered. "Don't tell me Harlem's finest is afraid." But Bumpy didn't answer. He didn't need to. Silence was his weapon, sharper than knives, heavier than guns. The outsider's bravado began to crumble, like dry paint flaking under pressure. He realized, too late, that respect was not something earned by shouting or by numbers. It was claimed, quietly, deliberately, mercilessly. Then the crowd noticed the subtle shift. Bumpy's hand twitched, not in anger, but in readiness. Every man in the room felt it, the unspoken signal that the line had been drawn. A single move could change everything. The outsider, sensing the room closing in, finally understood the truth. Power isn't measured by violence. It's measured by the silence that precedes it, the quiet before the storm. And the storm, when it came, would be precise, controlled, unforgettable. In that moment, the outsider's fate was sealed, not by the crowd, not by chaos, but by a calm that was louder than any scream. Then it happened. Not with shouting, not with hesitation, not with the chaos the outsider expected. Just 3 seconds, measured, deliberate, final. Bumpy moved, not wildly, not with rage, but with the inevitability of someone who had spent decades reading every room, every man, every intent. His hand shot up, precise, and in an instant the insult was corrected. Teeth met flesh with the efficiency of a predator that had long since learned patience. The outsider screamed, a sound swallowed immediately by the stunned silence around him. 400 men watched as the act unfolded in real time. No one intervened. No one dared. The air itself seemed to tighten, waiting, holding its breath. What was brutality to the untrained, was precision to Harlem. This wasn't violence for display. It was enforcement of law, Bumpy's law. The outsider stumbled backward, clutching his ear, disbelief and pain flickering across his face. For a moment, his bravado was gone, replaced by raw understanding. This was no ordinary man. This was Harlem's gatekeeper, and he did not forgive ignorance. Bumpy stepped back, calm restored. His hand lowered. The moment was over, almost too fast to register, but it had been complete. Control had never left him. Every man in the room knew it. You could insult, you could provoke, you could even touch, but only at your peril. And the lesson lingered longer than any scream. Respect, once forced to bend, would now stand firm. The outsider had underestimated more than a man. He had underestimated the weight of a legacy, the patience of authority, and the power of restraint. Bumpy didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He turned, slowly, eyes scanning the room, and every man saw it. Calm dominance, unshaken, unbroken. The line had been drawn, and no one would forget where it lay. The room stayed quiet long after the outsider ran or was carried out. 400 men exhaled, collectively, as if the air itself had been holding its breath for an eternity. Nothing more needed to be said. Nothing more needed to happen. The lesson had been carved into the minds of everyone present, sharper than any knife. Harlem talked about it quietly, in doorways, on stoops, in the corners of bars and barbershops. Not the act itself, not the blood, not the pain, but the principle. That calm, measured authority outweighed any flash of violence. That power was not about fists or fear. It was about timing, judgment, and the respect you commanded before anyone raised a hand. Young men, ambitious and restless, saw the standard. Older men, seasoned and wary, nodded with approval. Bumpy Johnson had reminded the city that the rules of respect were universal. That legacy isn't built in moments of chaos. It's forged in the moments where restraint meets necessity. No one doubted who controlled the streets. No one doubted who set the rules. And no one doubted who would carry Harlem's unspoken code into the future. Bumpy had acted once, decisively, and the city would whisper his story for decades. He didn't linger on the moment. He didn't need to. For Bumpy Johnson, victory wasn't in proving strength. It was in proving restraint, in showing that authority, once earned, did not have to be screamed or flaunted. It simply existed, undeniable and eternal. And Harlem remembered.